My name is Harrison, a third-year PhD student in the MIT Department of Physics, the one-in-a-century academic prodigy in my advisor's eyes, a frequent author in Q1 SCI journals. For the past 5 years, apart from infinitely complex differential equations, my life has revolved around only one person. Cindy. Cindy is my childhood friend and girlfriend. She looks very pure, the kind of first love face that makes passing boys stop when she bows her head to read in the library. But only I know that her talent for research is probably about the same as my talent for ballet. Practically zero. Harrison, the characterization data for the nanomaterials still don't match. What am I going to do for tomorrow's presentation? She always clings to my arm and whines in that tearful tone. As for me, with 2 dark circles under my eyes, having pulled 3 all-nighters in a row, I used an algorithm I invented to correct her model, and even willingly put her name on what was originally my own key first author work. Cindy, getting published in advanced materials this time means you'll definitely get to stay on after graduation. I took her hand, my eyes full of light. Cindy smiled like a flower. Harrison, you've been the best to me. When you graduate, we'll get married. I'll make it up to you twice over. She really did begin to shine. With that top journal paper I had fed her, she became the Academy's hottest research goddess. Invitation to every young scholars forum kept pouring in, and even the school's exterior posters carried her photo. Along with that came swarms of eager suitors. Actually, it wasn't that I hadn't had other options. In the first year of grad school, the business school genius known as the MIT campus belle, Elaine, once slammed a thick stack of business plans down on my lab bench. Harrison, I'm interested in your graphene patent. And incidentally, I'm interested in you. Be my boyfriend. You get 70% of the patent dividends. I get 30, and I'll be yours. That day Elaine wore a bespoke trench coat, her lips a blazing red, beautiful in a way that felt like an attack. How did I answer then? I pushed up my glasses, as cold as an unfeeling soldering iron. Sorry, Elaine. First, my patent has already been assigned to the school. Second, I have a girlfriend whom I love very much. Third, the financial projection model on page 3, line 2 of your plan underestimates inflation by an order of magnitude. You should recalculate. Elaine stomped away in her high heels, her face ashen with anger, leaving behind, "You're such a thick-headed graphene brain." Before striding off, I thought that by remaining faithful to Cindy I could earn a lifetime together. Instead, reality slapped me hard. 3 months before the end of my 3rd year of graduate school, I discovered a revolutionary new mechanism for quantum tunneling. It was the result I planned to submit to nature, and the trump card I intended to use to propose to Cindy at graduation. That day I was ecstatic as I brought the USB drive containing all the core source code and experimental data back to our rented apartment. That night Cindy for once cooked a whole spread and poured me plenty of red wine. The next morning, not only was the USB drive gone, Cindy was gone too. 3 days later, the Academy's official website posted a notice of a major research achievement. Cindy, as the sole first author, had successfully published a groundbreaking breakthrough on quantum tunneling in Nature. I rushed to her office like a madman, only to see a scene outside the door that shattered my worldview. A young man in a bespoke suit, wearing a Patel Philippe on his wrist, was holding Cindy in his arms. He was the notorious rich second-generation heir of Jiang City, the successor of the Sioux Corporation. Sean. Cindy, thanks to that stupid ex-boyfriend of yours and his data, my dad saw this Nature paper and immediately agreed to hand over that several $100 million tech park project to me to manage. Sean pinched Cindy's chin. Cindy laughed coquettishly and leaned against him. Sean, don't mention Harrison. He's so rigid, like a factory default robot that's never been tuned. If it weren't for his paper, could I have put up with him for 5 years? Now that the result is public, even if he goes to report it, the school will suppress it to protect its reputation. Besides, I've already beaten him to it and filed the patent for the core code in both our names. Outside the door I was freezing all over. The feeling was like raising a pig with so much hard work, only to have it not only root up the family's cabbage, but also tear down my pigsty to sell the scrap iron. I wandered distraught through an empty intersection as the driving rain made it impossible to open my eyes. A screech of brakes shattered the air, and the tremendous impact hurled me into the sky. In the last second before consciousness faded, I looked at the ring I had meant to use for a proposal and let out a self-mocking laugh. Harrison, oh Harrison, you can calculate celestial orbits with your calculus, but you couldn't figure out the venom beneath a surgically altered face. If I could do it over, to hell with love. I'll dominate the academic world myself. Harrison, Harrison, wake up. How do you even set the boundary conditions for this dataset? I have to defend my provincial, outstanding graduate thesis tomorrow. A familiar voice drifted in, one that made me physiologically nauseous. I snapped my eyes open. Sunlight poured through the blinds of the physics lab and fell across the scratched experiment benches. On the monitor before me, dense lines of code were running, the core data for the follow-up expansion project to that advanced materials paper that had cemented Cindy's status as a research goddess. I glanced down at my hands intact. No blood, no cold rain. The digital clock on the wall read clearly. April 15th, 2025. I was reborn. Reborn before all the tragedies happened, that is, on the very night I helped her finish her final research project. Harrison, what are you spacing out for? I'm talking to you. Cindy pushed me with some displeasure. A flicker of impatience crossed her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a feigned look of admiration. If she doesn't get first place in the defense tomorrow, she won't get the $300,000 personal research scholarship sponsored by the Sioux Corporation. Sioux Corporation, Sean. When I heard that name, I sneered inwardly. In my last life, it was at this point, through that scholarship, that she managed to get connected to Sean. I watched the model on the screen reach 99% completion, a faint, almost imperceptible curve, tugging at the corner of my mouth. Data, Cindy, don't rush. The final parameter of this model needs manual fine-tuning. My long fingers pounded the keyboard. I didn't delete her data. That would be too obvious. What I did was quietly implant a hidden, constant trap into the core dynamical equation. Within a certain temperature range, the model would look flawless, but once subjected to industrial scale experiments or high-precision replication, the data would collapse utterly, deviating exponentially. It's what you might call an academic Trojan horse done. Saved. I pulled out the USB drive and handed it to her, my tone as calm as a stagnant pool. Wow, Harrison, you're amazing. I'll reward you with a kiss on never mind. You smell like lab exhaust. I'll go back and prepare the PPT. Cindy snatched the USB drive as if it were a treasure, not even bothering to take a gentler tone, and stormed off in her high heels. I watched her retreating figure, took out a wet wipe, and carefully wiped the key she had just touched 3 times. Cindy, this is the last gift I'll give you. I hope you fly high enough, because only when you fall will it hurt enough. The next afternoon, I took the initiative and called Cindy. Hello, Harrison. I'm in the underground archives of the university library right now. The signal's not great here. I'm looking up old journals. What's up? Cindy sounded a little out of breath on the other end of the line, and faint violin music could be heard in the background. The underground archives of the library. I stood outside the newly opened Michelin 3-star French restaurant at the school gate, looking at the window seats by the floor-to-ceiling glass. Cindy was wearing a newly bought Chanel suit, her smile like a blossom as she sat there. Opposite her sat Sean, a second-generation rich kid in a tailored suit. He held her hand and was fastening a dazzling diamond necklace around her neck. Yeah, it's so dusty down here. Cough, cough. If nothing urgent comes up, I'll hang up now and bring you dinner tonight. Cindy replied perfunctorily on the phone. I said to my phone in a flat voice, no need, Cindy. Look to your right. Cindy in the restaurant instinctively turned her head and met my gaze through the window. Me, standing outside with my hands in my pockets. In that instant, Her expression changed completely. The delicate little steel fork in her hand clattered onto the porcelain plate. I pushed open the heavy glass door of the restaurant, and under the polite attention of the waiter walked straight to their table. Harrison, what are you doing here? Cindy stood up in a fluster, trying to explain. Listen to me. This is Sean from the Sioux group. We were just talking about follow-up collaboration on the scholarship. Cindy, who is this? Dressed like a street stall vendor. One of your school's delivery drivers. Sean arched an eyebrow, contempt dripping from his gaze as he deliberately flashed the Rolex on his wrist. I didn't even glance at Sean. I just looked at Cindy quietly. Cindy, when you lie, remember to find a quiet place. Cindy, caught in the lie, had the panic on her face settle within seconds into a kind of almost spiteful indifference. She slowly sat back down, folded her arms, and looked up at me. Since you've seen it all, there's no point hiding it from you. Harrison, let's break up. Oh, what's the reason? I asked. Reason? Cindy snorted coldly, pointed at the restaurant, then at the sports car outside. Afternoon tea here costs $2,000 per person. The necklace Sean gave me was $350,000, and you live on the $1,500 a month graduate stipend the school gives you. And the best you ever took me to eat was that fast food place on the back street of campus. The life I want. You can't give me. I sighed. Cindy, did you forget that the paper you submitted for the scholarship yesterday, even the abstract, was something I stayed up helping you polish? So what of it? Cindy lifted her chin, her self-righteousness almost astounding. You volunteered for that. Besides, what use is skill alone in this society? Without Sean's financial maneuvers, your expertise is nothing but a scrap of paper. The project is under my name now. Harrison, face reality. You're a good man, but you're too poor. Financial maneuvers, a scrap of paper. I repeated the words and suddenly couldn't help laughing. It was a laugh of genuine relief. What are you laughing at? Have you lost your mind from the shock? Cindy frowned. I turned away and waved a hand behind me. No, I'm just glad. Oh, by the way, that necklace is pretty. Sean, remember to buy a few more after all. They might come in handy as collateral someday. Cheap scoundrel, get lost. Sean spat contemptuously from behind, stepping out of the restaurant into the April breeze. I took a deep breath of fresh air. Without Cindy, that vampire, my inspiration flowed like a spring. This life, everything that belongs to me, no one else was to touch. Having fully left melodramatic romance behind, I began living like a deity. I got up at 6 every morning, quantum mechanics in my left hand, solid-state physics in my right, and my coding efficiency tripled, if not more. Yet turning points in fate often arrive without warning. It was a Friday afternoon. I just finished the first stage validation of my solo project in the university's top academic incubator, about to head to the cafeteria for a chicken drumstick as a reward. A long, pale leg suddenly blocked the doorway of the lab. I looked up along those perfectly shaped legs in a short skirt, a black biker jacket, a head of big wavy hair casually spilling over her shoulders, features so delicate she could be a mixed-race porcelain doll. Yet those pretty almond eyes were full of the arrogance I came to pick a fight with today. MIT campus beauty, a legend of the business school. Elaine Harrison, I heard you broke up with that. Cindy. Elaine crossed her arms, chewing gum, looking at me with a provocative stare. I stopped, pushed up my glasses. Elaine, please don't obstruct traffic in a public place. Also, who I break up with doesn't exactly fall within the scope of macroeconomics research in the business school. Cut the chatter. Elaine stepped forward, and a faint cold, woody perfume immediately invaded my breathing space. She pulled a huge pink thermos out from behind her and shoved it into my arms. What is this? A new chemical weapon? I raised an eyebrow. Elaine snapped. It's double-boiled American ginseng black bone chicken soup that I made myself. I heard from people at your college that you've been living in the lab like a madman lately and have lost weight. Drink it. I stared at the pink thermos stamped with Hello Kitty, then at the merciless, icy cool business prodigy standing in front of me. the whole scene jarringly mismatched, like microwaving a durian. Elaine, if I remember correctly, I rejected you 2 years ago. You said that was 2 years ago. Elaine snorted, closing in on me. Her flawless face was only 5 centimeters away, and I could even see the mischief under her thick lashes. Back then you had a girlfriend. Although I like to grab territory in the business world, I disdain stealing someone else's man. Now you're single. I hereby officially announce that I'm taking a stake and entering the market, preparing to launch a hostile takeover of you. In my 20-plus years of life, it was the first time I'd ever heard someone describe chasing after someone as a hostile takeover. Sorry, I'm not for sale. I slipped past her and started to leave. Stop. Elaine grabbed the back of my collar with a force like a female bandit. Harrison, if you don't drink today, I'll hang a banner in front of your physics department every day that says, Physics genius Harrison seduced and abandoned. A con artist of food and drink. I was stunned. That's slander. Elaine tilted her chin in triumph. All's fair in business battles. Drink or not, for the sake of the physics department's century-old reputation, and to avoid my advisor mistaking me for having some peculiar fetish, I gave in. I have to admit, this chicken soup, aside from being a little too salty, actually tasted not bad. Elaine's way of pursuing someone was the polar opposite of Cindy's subtle, imperceptible siphoning. Her offensive could be called the saturated bombardment of the industrial age. It manifested in the following ways. Scene 1. Grabbing a seat in the library, because I like sitting on the third floor of the library by the window, as close to an outlet as possible. Every morning at 7, when I arrived on the dot, I would find that seat already holding a cup of iced Americano and a copy of Advanced Corporate Finance from the business school. And Elaine always sat across from me wearing sunglasses. When she saw me arrive, she pulled them down halfway to reveal her pretty eyes. Harrison, morning. The cost of me saving your seat today was half an hour of sleep, equivalent to $500. I suggest you square the account by taking me to lunch. Scene 2. The laboratory support cart. One night around 11, I was tearing my hair out in the lab because a superconducting data set had jammed. Suddenly the lab door was pushed open. Elaine came in pushing a high-end hotel room service cart she must have procured from somewhere. On it were not only steaming late-night dishes but even an ergonomic armchair. I can tell your old chair will give you a herniated disc if you sit in it much longer. Swap to this one, imported from Sweden. She scooped out a bowl of Boston lobster congee, while casting a disapproving look at my workbench. You scientists, your physical environment is this bad. Want me to buy this campus and build you a dedicated lab? I ate my lobster porridge and mumbled, Elaine, wealth isn't spent like that. You're being corrupted by capitalism. I'm happy to. She propped her chin on her hand and stared at me without blinking. Harrison, you focusing on your research is way more handsome than Buffett reading a financial report. I nearly choked on a piece of lobster. What really broke down my defenses was a sudden laboratory accident. On a stormy night in mid-May, while I was conducting a high-voltage vacuum tube discharge experiment, the school's antique transformer was struck by lightning. The lab's wiring shorted out in an instant, sparking small electrical fires, and the whole room was suddenly plunged into pitch blackness and thick smoke. The school's alarm blared. Groping in the dark, I shut off the main valves, coughed, and ran out of the teaching building. As soon as I reached the ground floor hall, I saw a drenched figure, soaked through, not even holding an umbrella, rushing like a madwoman toward the cordoned-off area. Classmate, it's dangerous inside. We're checking for smoke. You can't go in. The security guard held her back desperately. Let go of me. Harrison is still in there. If a single hair on his head is harmed, I'll tear this building of your school down. Elaine's usual elegance and haughtiness were gone. Her hair was plastered to her face in disarray, and her voice was thick with sobs and trembling. Elaine, I shouted at the sound of my voice. Elaine spun around, seeing me standing there unharmed. She froze for 3 seconds, then stepped forward and barreled into my arms like a ferocious little leopard. She hit me with such force I nearly flew backward. She clung to my waist, tears mixed with rain soaking my shirt. "Harrison, you bastard. You trying to scare me to death." I heard the physics building exploded at the school gate. I didn't even take my car. I ran all the way here. I felt her heart hammering against me. Those hands that were always used to test tubes and keyboards hovered in the air for a moment, before slowly settling on her thin back. I patted it gently. "Don't cry, Elaine. It was just a short circuit, not an explosion besides. I do physics, not explosives," I joked. Elaine lifted her head from my arms. Her eyes reddened like a rabbit's and bit my shoulder hard. "I don't care. Harrison, you owe me an explanation today. My entire business empire's succession. Rights aren't as important as you are. Are you going to make it onto my personal balance sheet or not?" Seeing her face still disheveled yet unbearably beautiful, and those eyes full of fierce warmth and sincerity, the last line of defense in my heart completely collapsed. The shadow of the previous life was at this moment utterly dispelled. I took off my glasses, wiped the mist from the lenses, put them back on, then tilted my head slightly and looked into her eyes. "Elaine, the hostile acquisition succeeded. From now on, my personal ownership belongs to you." Elaine wiped her tears into a smile, looped her arm around my neck, stood on tiptoe, and amid the alarms blaring through the physics building and the pouring rain, kissed me hard. "You said it yourself, Harrison, no returns. No refunds from now on." Just as Elaine and I were launching the sweetest collaboration between academia and the business world, Cindy's good days came to an end. Using the model with the constant trap I had left behind, she successfully secured the $300,000 scholarship from the Sioux Corporation and loudly announced she would take up residence in Sioux's new energy technology incubation park, vowing to achieve industrial-scale mass production of the nanomaterial within 3 months. But science is the most honest of arts. The way you try to fool it, it will fool you back. 2 months later, the production line that Sioux Corporation had invested over $10 million in officially started operations. Yet no matter how the technicians adjusted the process, the nanofilms produced would inexplicably suffer a cliff-like drop in conductivity with a defect rate as high as 99%. "This can't be." Harrison clearly said this model was perfect. Cindy raged hysterically in the R&D center. "Cindy, explain to me why there are irreversible singularities on the temperature control curve in Phase 3. This is not mass production technology at all. This theoretical model contains a logical deadlock. How on earth did you write this paper?" The chief engineer held the report, his face dark. Sean sitting beside him looked even worse, as if he had eaten flies. He had staked everything on this project. The interest on the bank loan was burning through their funds by the day. "Cindy, aren't you MIT's research goddess? Didn't you say this technology was invincible? We've got hundreds of millions in orders waiting for delivery, and you show me this." Sean grabbed Cindy by the collar. Cindy's pale face was filled with fear. Memories of the past flashed through her mind. Whenever she encountered problems with the data, she only needed to act cute, and Harrison would send her a perfect revised version before dawn. "Harrison, yes. It must be Harrison. He made this project. He has to know how to fix it." Cindy shouted like she'd grabbed a lifeline. 3 days later, beneath the MIT Physics Institute, Elaine and I were arm in arm about to walk to a small family-style restaurant near the school. Elaine was wearing an elegant beige dress today, carrying the briefcase with the latest experiment report for me, leaning against my shoulder like a tender companion as she argued with me about what to eat that evening. "Harrison." A shrill, exhausted cry broke the sweet mood. Cindy burst out now. Where was the goddess she used to be? Dark circles around her eyes made her look like a giant panda. Her hair was a mess. Her expensive clothes were all wrinkled, and she gave off the frantic air of someone at the end of their rope. I stopped, put Elaine behind me, and frowned slightly. "Cindy, is something wrong?" "Harrison, save me, I beg you, save me." Cindy lunged forward, trying to grab my sleeve. but I turned coldly to the side and avoided her. She collapsed to the ground and cried, with tears streaking down her face. There's a problem with the nanomaterial data. The production line can't be started at all. Sean wants to break up with me and make me pay tens of millions in damages. Harrison, I know I was wrong. That was our hard work, right? You love me so much. You must have a backup, right? Help me fix it. I'll cut ties with Sean immediately and we'll start over. Okay. I looked at Cindy on the ground, my eyes betraying no ripple, only a thread of pity. Cindy, I gave you a chance. That day at the cafe, I asked you whether you had forgotten who helped you write your thesis. You answered that your skills apart from capital were just worthless paper. I looked down on her from above. Now take your capital and go marry your worthless paper. No, Harrison, you can't be so heartless. You used to never even let yourself say a harsh word to me. Cindy sobbed hysterically. At that moment, Elaine, who had been standing behind me the whole time, slowly stepped forward. She looked down at Cindy from on high. The pride and contempt in her gaze were like a daddy watching a hopping grasshopper. TSK, so this is Harrison's ex. Elaine hooked her arm through mine with practiced grace, deliberately resting her head on my shoulder, and smiled at Cindy. Cindy, I really do thank you. Cindy froze. You are Elaine. What gives you the right to thank me? Elaine's smile blossomed, sharp and musical, but each word a barb. Thank you for your blindness. Thank you for treating such a one-of-a-kind scientific treasure like scrap metal and throwing him away, which gave me the chance to pick him up and cherish him properly. Do you think Harrison is just some lab drone who knows only experiments? Sorry, in my eyes, he's the golden goose who can pry open the whole new energy industry, and the man I love most in this life. Elaine held out her other hand and shook the 5-carat pink diamond ring on it. See this? Harrison bought it for me with the down payment from the patent he got on his own. No need for any Sioux Group sponsorship. Harrison alone is the biggest fortune. It's impossible. This can't be. Cindy stared at the blinding diamond, then at how perfectly matched the two of them looked, and the venom of jealousy instantly corroded her reason. She sprang up like a madwoman and pointed at us, shouting, "Don't gloat. Harrison, you plagiarist. Those results were published under my name. Just you wait. Sean won't let you off." Driven to complete desperation, Cindy and Sean, facing ruin, finally descended into madness. 2 weeks later, MIT hosted a grand international academic conference. Not only would top domestic academicians attend, but also tenured professors from many prestigious universities abroad. And I, as the representative of MIT's Department of Physics, will deliver the closing academic talk at the conference on a new type of two-dimensional superconducting material. This is the core achievement I completed alone in this life with full independent intellectual property. The paper has passed Nature's final review and will be formally published next week. The night before the presentation, the lab's access control system was suddenly hit by a hacker attack of unknown origin. Although the alarms were promptly silenced, Elaine traced a clue immediately through her family security network. Harrison, Sean can't sit still. Elaine sat on the couch in my living room, her fingers flying across the laptop keyboard, a cold, powerful businesswoman's smile on her face. They obtain the PPT for your report tomorrow and the core algorithm demo video through a counselor inside the school. Cindy is planning to storm in with the media halfway through your presentation tomorrow and accuse you of plagiarizing the follow-up project to her nanomaterials paper from 2 years ago. I walked up behind her holding a cup of hot milk, leaned down and kissed her on the cheek. Oh, how do they plan to prove I plagiarized? Cindy has a forged lab notebook with the timeline deliberately altered to 3 years ago, and Sean paid a lot of money to some unscrupulous independent media. They're prepared to livestream the incident across the web, hoping to use public opinion to completely ruin your reputation, prevent you from graduating, even get you expelled from academia. One Elaine hooked her arm around my neck, a flash of ferocity in her eyes. Do you want me to use my father's connections and make the The Sioux Corporation vanish from joshing tonight. 2. I smiled faintly and ruffled her hair. No need. Matters of academia are best settled in an academic way. If they want to play with timelines, I'll show them what a true dimensionality reduction strike looks like. The next day, MIT's 10,000-seat auditorium was packed. Flashbulbs popped. The front rows were filled with titans of academia and every kind of media. I wore the suit Elaine had picked out for me, stood stiff-backed at the podium, with a laser pointer in hand, and spoke with easy confidence. Complex equations and exquisite diagrams of material. Structures unrolled across the screen as I explained, drawing approving nods from the big names in the audience. Just as the lecture was winding to a close and the hall was about to break into applause, the rear doors of the auditorium were abruptly and forcefully thrown open. Harrison is an outright plagiarist dressed all in black and clutching a stack of documents. Cindy barreled in, flanked by several indie reporters hoisting cameras. Her fury palpable. The room erupted. The security guards by the audience immediately moved to intervene. Ivan raised a hand to pause them, then spoke into the microphone with calmness. Miss, may I ask what this is about? Ivan stepped out of the crowd as well, adopting a sanctimonious air as he bowed to the academics in the front row. Professors, I am the head of Sioux Technologies. We hereby file a formal complaint against MIT graduate student Harrison for long-term plagiarism of the research of our company's technical consultant, Miss Cindy. All the superconducting core data he presented today, its underlying logic entirely originates from the high-impact paper Miss Cindy published 2 years ago. Cindy slammed the documents down on the presentation table. These are my original lab notebooks. Harrison, 2 years ago you were my assistant and had access to these core data. Now you shamelessly dress them up and present them as your own. I demand you apologize publicly and get out of academia. The cameras of the new media instantly zoomed in, and the barrage of comments in the live stream began to roll frantically. Clueless netizens started hurling furious abuse, facing a battlefield that could ruin any young scholar. I didn't even change expression, displayed on the wall. I turned to the side, looked at the giant screen, and calmly said, Miss Cindy, you claim that the underlying logic of my work came from you, from the advanced materials paper you published 2 years ago. Cindy thought I was frightened. She smiled smugly. I was the first author on that paper. You can't weasel out of it. Very well. I pressed the laser pointer's toggle. The big screen suddenly shifted, no longer showing superconducting materials, but dense lines of base-level code analysis, with one segment glaringly highlighted in red. I pointed at that block of red code and cleared my throat. Colleagues, professors, since Cindy brought up the paper from 2 years ago, I have to reveal a little secret I've kept hidden for 2 years. 2 years ago, while writing the underlying dynamical model for that paper, due to certain irresistible circumstances, I embedded a special constant checksum into line 404 of the core equation. That checksum has no physical meaning, but if you decode it as hexadecimal. I tapped the keyboard lightly. The red text on the screen transformed in an instant, and finally, on the giant LED display, a line of characters appeared clearly. Assets belong to Harrison, made only for Cindy's graduation. The room fell into a deadly silence, which was immediately broken by a tsunami of chatter. An elderly academic in the front row pushed up his bifocals and couldn't help laughing out loud. Haha, Harrison, your academic anti-counterfeit label is really avant-garde. Cindy's face went instantly paler than the dead. She stared fixedly at the line of text on the screen, her whole body trembling like a sieve. No, this can't be. How could there be such a line? I've checked the code countless times. I looked at her coldly and said, of course you wouldn't know, because with your coding skills, you can't even break through this layer of encapsulation. What's more, that so-called mass production project you've been running at Sioux Technologies for the past 2 months keeps producing defective products every day, because this model contains a thermodynamic instability singularity I deliberately left in. In other words, That whole technology was a dead end from the very start. Sean beside her heard that and was struck as if by lightning. He turned and slapped Cindy across the face hard. Bitch. How dare you use fake technology to swindle my money? Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. In the VIP seats of the auditorium, Elaine stood slowly applauding. Behind her trailed 4 or 5 corporate lawyers in suits. Sean, Miss Cindy, before you plan to frame my fiancé, MYLYN Group's legal team has already filed suit in court. Elaine waved her hand, and the lawyers behind her immediately handed over an official letter first. Sue Technologies is suspected of illegally stealing core secrets from an MIT national laboratory. We have reported it to the police, who should now be waiting in Mr. Sue's office. Second, Miss Cindy has long engaged in academic fraud and plagiarized others' work. MIT's academic committee has formally launched an investigation, and your master's degree will be legally revoked in half an hour. Elaine walked to the podium, casually slipped her arm around my waist, and smiled slightly at the press cameras. Also, a quick notice to our media friends. Dr. Harrison's independently produced Nature paper will be published globally in Sync next Monday. Everything Sue Group has done today is nothing more than a dying clown's last flail. After 3 seconds of silence, the live chat exploded with "Oh my God" plot twist and top student power fantasy flooding the screen. Sean's legs went weak and he collapsed to the ground. Cindy, staring at the golden boy and girl pair on stage, was filled with despair and remorse. Finally, she rolled her eyes and, overcome with jealousy, fainted outright. After that farce, Jiang Qing staged a sensational spectacle of bankruptcy and expulsion. Cindy was expelled from MIT, her master's degree revoked, and she faced a joint lawsuit from the university and a research foundation, condemned to spend the rest of her life entangled in endless litigation and debt. The Sue Corporation, accused of stealing state secrets and massive commercial fraud, saw its stock hit limit downs in succession and was completely taken over at fire sale prices by Elaine's father's Lin Group within 2 weeks, reduced to a footnote in business history, and I officially began the life of soaring that belonged to me. 8 months later, Stockholm, Sweden, the Young Scholars Forum held ahead of the Nobel Prize in Physics ceremony. As the youngest invited speaker, I delivered an academic report on a breakthrough in room temperature superconductivity. The entire hall rose to its feet, applause rolling like thunder for a full 10 minutes. At the banquet, countless foreign professors, champagne in hand, tried to extend olive branches to me. I politely declined all the invitations. Sorry, everyone. My research roots are in my country, and my chief asset manager does not agree to me immigrating. The professors were stunned. Chief asset manager, which sovereign fund? I smiled and pointed toward the entrance to the banquet. Elaine was wearing a bespoke evening gown, dazzling beyond measure, holding a glass of champagne and swaying gracefully in high heels as she walked toward me. No, if so, then I'm going to have to ask you to leave. In that instant, the gaze of every noble in the hall was completely captured by her. Yes, it's her. I walked over, took the champagne from her hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and slipped an arm around her slender waist. Talking about what? Is someone trying to lure you with a high salary again? Elaine raised an eyebrow, teasing deliberately. I whispered in her ear, they want to tempt me with a tenured professorship. But I told them I only accept my wife's life imprisonment. Elaine's cheeks flushed, a rare sight. Then she huffed, coquettishly proud. Smart of you, but seeing how perfectly you performed today, I've decided to add another $1 billion to your personal research fund. At your command, my investor. 30 years later, in the honor hall of MIT's Department of Physics hung a large photograph. In the picture was me, by then an academician of both national academies, standing before a major national scientific installation. Beside me was Elaine, still graceful and beautiful, hailed as the Iron Lady of the business world. On a late autumn afternoon, Elaine and I walked arm in arm along The Ginkgo line promenade at MIT. The ground strewn with golden leaves, just as we had 30 years earlier. Harrison, you've spent your life calculating endless formulas, probing the deepest mysteries of the universe, so tell me, how does physics explain love? Elaine leaned on my shoulder, though fine lines of time had begun to mark the corners of her eyes. Those eyes were as ardent as when she once stopped me at the laboratory door. I paused and gently tucked the stray white hair behind her ear. I pointed to the ground beneath our feet, then to the vast starry sky above. In quantum mechanics, there's a concept called quantum entanglement. Two particles that were originally unrelated, once entangled, even if they are separated by the greatest distances across galaxies, when one changes, the other will instantly respond. This response transcends the limits of time and space. Ilya tightened my hold on her hand, a little cold yet still slender, slipped it into the pocket of my coat and smiled faintly. In my previous life, I was lost in a wrong set of data, almost falling into the void. In this life, when I opened my eyes in the dark, you were the disturbance that broke the balance, Elaine. You don't need to understand physics, because you are my quantum entanglement. No matter how many times time and space are reshaped, in my world, your existence is the one core, constant that cannot be reformatted. Elaine paused, then her eyes reddened, but she couldn't help letting out a soft laugh like the fierce campus belle of old. She pinched my cheek hard. Married 30 years and you're sweet. Talk still smells of engine oil. But my long-term investment this lifetime has paid off gloriously. The last light of the setting sun stretched our silhouettes as we leaned against each other. Truth is cold, but with you by my side, it becomes the hottest warmth in the world.